Hello and welcome back to this downful idealistic crusade. I just wanted to talk some and give my thoughts on the Sony announcement that they are killing off physical media for PlayStation consoles, but also their announcement that they're killing off the storefronts for prior generations, which is a major blow to preservation and to collectors as well. But this signals a corporate shift in thinking in physical media overall, so it means that we now have to consider what studios and labels might start doing in terms of physical media releases for film and television and animation. It's, of course, a different paradigm and a whole different setup because games have grown larger, and typically most modern discs themselves do not contain the entire game or are more glorified install discs, and the whole market has shifted dramatically towards digital distribution. So, on paper, in the numbers, and in some technical areas, it can make sense to prioritize digital for games. But with the systems that are in place, it is a more controlled scenario to where you don't actually own anything. You are merely purchasing a license to use said material for a certain time, and whenever something is changed or removed or there's a rights issue, basically anytime something is removed from the platform or you no longer have access to it, you have nothing. And this is what we're seeing in all forms of media, with corporations and companies wanting to push subscription-based services to guarantee a consistent revenue stream and keep people consistently paying whatever they want to charge and have that monthly amount coming in every single month, regardless of what they're actually paying to have access to, and that can change at any time. So there are multiple reasons why it's understandable Sony would go this route, but the way they're going about it and the further limiting of people's choices has created a giant backlash, as it should. They're going about it in the wrong way, and in particular, it's a great challenge to preservation. Game preservation is not where it should be, and once you lose access to something or it's locked to a previous console generation or outdated hardware, it's then basically left up to fans and unofficial grassroots efforts to resurrect that material, whether it's through emulation or actually modifying and hacking older consoles to just simply try and preserve games which are otherwise lost to time. But the removal of access and ability to own what you purchase is a key of any physical media collector, and something that I think all of us feel that if you spend your hard-earned money on something, you want, even if it's a digital product, you want something that is tangible that you actually own. You don't want to simply pay for an empty box or a slip of paper or a digital license, which is what you're paying for. But it also means that you're locked to whatever version of the material is on the platform. And we've seen countless times with various games that get updated or tweaked or changed, sometimes not for the better. But also with films on streaming, you never know what version is going to turn up, what audio track it's going to have, what technical problems or transfer problems or quirks and screw-ups it's going to have. You're not guaranteed that you're getting the best or original version of something. You're at the mercy of whatever's on the platform that you are paying to access or paying to temporarily rent a license to access this form of media. Now, films and video games are two different things in regards to physical media, but this is Sony, one of the biggest studios technically as well, who also invented the Blu-ray disc format and has a financial interest in the sales of optical discs. And for them in their massive gaming division to suddenly say we're done with physical media for the most part, that's not a good sign. And this, of course, could encourage other studios to try doing this with all of their optical and physical media releases. The difference is having a film on a Blu-ray or a UHD is only going to be a certain size and not require updates. It's not going to be as technically oriented as a modern game, which sees continual patches and updates and has a far more substantial file size. But of course, the digital gaming market has been oriented in pushing digital sales for so long that most of the time there's not really a point to getting a physical release unless you specifically want a physical release for your collection, and there's nothing wrong with that. But typically digital releases are cheaper in sales, they are easier to get, you don't have to order a release and wait for it to get in. Typically physical releases actually cost more than the digital versions, or they're exactly the same. And as I said before, a lot of physical game releases are merely glorified install discs or don't contain the full game. But at least with a physical copy, you have something tangible, and you still would technically be able to install and play the game on your console. But if the entire game isn't contained on the disc, if the game is suddenly removed or changed on the digital storefront, then likely you would be stuck with whatever that version is. For example, the Insomniac Spider-Man that came out on PS4 had a PS5 remaster that did change the model for Peter Parker in the game and made a few other tweaks, and so now the PS5 remastered version is what you get on the storefront. So the only way that you have the original version of the game is having the disc version or getting it from, I guess you can still get it from the PS4 store, of course, while that's still open. In terms of games that are glorified install discs and digital versus physical and the ease, I just had that underlined for me with the PS5 games that I wanted to pick up. I originally was not going to get a PS5, but there were 3 games that I really wanted to play, and I had to save up and get a PS5 while it was on sale. So it took a while as consoles are getting increasingly expensive and we keep having more and more price hikes. But in terms of Spider-Man 2, I purchased the disc version, and then less than a week after I did, it was made freely available through the PlayStation Plus service, so that was not fun. But at the very least, I do have a physical disc copy now, which I can play later on if I don't have my PlayStation Plus membership, which after a certain point I will not have because I've already canceled it as a reaction to this. But with the other 2 games, First Light and Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, I wound up going 2 different routes. With Great Circle, it was actually significantly cheaper to get the digital version as it was on sale and it had a PlayStation Plus discount. So I spent almost $30 less than what the physical version would have cost me, and the physical version I would have had to order and wait for it to get shipped. And on top of that, the physical version is just a glorified install disc. It does not contain the full game on it, so there was really no point to that. It was also an unbelievably terrible game, so I'm glad I didn't waste my money on a physical version. First Light, on the other hand, is the first James Bond game in years, and there was no way in heck that I was not going to get a physical version, even though it's just a standard PS5 case with disc inside. And I was able to get it. I was able to get it on sale, so it was less expensive than the digital version, and I had to wait about a week for it to get here, but honestly, that wasn't a problem because I specifically wanted a physical version. And while the entire game, as far as I understand it, isn't on the disc, and it does require an online connection to actually play the game, there's at least enough of the game that you can install it onto your console should you lose access to the PlayStation servers. But that was the experience I had, seeing that with 2 modern games I wanted to play. One, the digital version was so heavily discounted that it was really a no-brainer, especially with the physical version basically being a glorified coaster. But then the other, I managed to get the physical version, which actually had I believe most of the game on it, or some of it at least. I was able to get the physical version for less, but I just had to wait a little bit for it to get here instead of having instant delivery over digital. Sony's actions are not designed for gamers or collectors. They are merely designed to fit their bottom line and increase profit margins, which of course on one hand is what any company has to do at the end of the day. They have to focus on profits and trying to stay in business. But there also has to be some acknowledgement of customer concerns and customer desires, and more we are losing access and the ability to own what we purchase. And that is starting to push more people into amassing physical media collections, to have something tangible, but to build your own library, which is what all of us lifelong collectors, I think, realized early on and couldn't really live without, because it becomes an extension of yourself. It becomes something you curate. And if we go to an entirely all digital future where you don't have access to things and things will come and go, it will put so many titles, regardless of medium, on enforced moratoriums, like when Disney bought the Fox library and took an entire studio library and basically shoved it in the vault, and we've never seen all of those titles again. It means that by building a library, you actually manage to preserve things in your own way, even if it means you have to loan things to other people. And that's another point that this decision affects, is that the entire used market is going to be upended. You won't be able to trade games with other people. Used video game stores are going to be hit enormously hard. Any store that buys or trades used games, whether it's a record store, a comic store, or a video game store, all of those already are struggling as independent businesses, but it's going to hit them enormously hard. But it's also going to change gaming culture and the way we consume physical media. But this has already happened to certain extents in other markets in terms of other mediums. I think the big thing to look at is what's happened in publishing, and how with ebooks and digital books, you, once again, for the most part, are not allowed to own what you purchase. Amazon is the big offender here, as they have tried to gobble up as much of the publishing market as they can. They finally changed it to where you cannot download the books that you purchase. You cannot download a physical file of what you purchase. You are merely in their ecosystem subscribing or purchasing things, and you're just purchasing a license to access that material for a particular time. And if it gets changed, if it gets removed, you're out of luck. An example of that would, of course, be the Ian Fleming estate deciding to censor and edit Fleming's James Bond novels, and then changing all of the available versions to the censored versions. So now, when you access the ebooks or audiobooks on any platform, unless somebody goofed or it has not been updated yet, you're going to be getting only the censored ebook or the censored audiobook, because they made new audiobooks of the censored altered text as well. So that's just a particular example where there's already been something where an entire body of work has been altered, and you only now have access to the altered versions for as long as they stay on a particular platform. Amazon also forces exclusivity agreements with authors and publishers, forcing them to only sell books and audiobooks on their platform and no other, which means that a lot of books are tied to Amazon, and so all you can do is experience them through the Amazon ecosystem. You cannot download them, nor can they be sold on another platform, nor can they be sold as standalone ebooks that you can purchase and download from like an author's website. And over a short span of time, Amazon has pretty much cornered the entire digital publishing market. And so with Sony pushing PlayStation to an all-digital storefront and forcing you to accept PlayStation Plus membership and whatever prices and subscriptions they will force you to endure to be able to use their platforms and access any games, it's much the same thing. However, there is something in regards to what's going on with ebooks that Sony could actually follow, and this would at least go a long way in terms of addressing concerns and the gaming outcry that has happened. And that would be to follow the lead of the Kobo storefront. Now, for those who aren't aware, Kobo is owned by Rakuten, which is a big company, but they make their own e-readers, which are third party and not forcing you to be in a particular ecosystem. They accept multiple file types, but what's crucially important is that for the most part, so long as there's not a rights issue, when you purchase an ebook or an audiobook from the Kobo store, you are allowed to download what you purchased. You are allowed to download an EPUB or a PDF file, whatever the hard copy is of the material you have purchased. And so that means you have a physical, tangible, well, I mean, it's a digital file, but you have the actual thing that you purchased in some form. And you can put that on your hard drive. So if something ever happened, or you closed your Kobo account, or something got removed from the store, or you just got another e-reader, whatever it is, you've got the thing that you purchased, and you can still enjoy that, and you can still use that because you bought it and you were able to download a hard copy of it. Now, of course, games are much larger, but since you're already having to most of the time download an entire game, Sony should at least allow the option for customers to download a hard copy that is not locked to the PlayStation console itself. I know this is going to be something that they're obviously not going to want to do, but if you want customers to feel like they're actually being heard, and you want to ensure that gamers don't feel like they're being ripped off, you need to allow them to actually own what they purchase. And I mean that in every sense of the word. And so allowing the downloading of a hard copy by the consumer who has already purchased this, should they wish to do it, that should be an option where it's possible. Again, it's going to vary depending on licenses and rights and companies involved. So there's obviously going to be red tape. But at the very least, it should be an option where possible. I think that's something we need to see happening more in the digital realm in regards to how our media is being continually locked away from us. We merely get to do a timeshare in terms of access to media, which then can be changed or updated or manipulated whenever someone feels like it, or it could just be a bad version. And in regards to films and things on physical media, I'm just worried what some of the studios will make of all of this, especially Sony themselves, who already, even though they own the Blu-ray disc format and created it, they don't necessarily make the most physical media releases. They do enough, but in terms of the studios, they don't have as big of an output as they certainly could have. The physical media market is not that large for most studios in terms of their end-of-year reporting, in terms of the percentage of sales and money they make, but it is a consistent revenue stream, and it also encourages them to keep up with their archiving practices, their catalog updates, their restoration and remastering processes, although some studios put the effort in and do this very well, and some studios are horrible at this. Either way, it encourages further preservation efforts. It gets more films and materials restored and back into the pipeline, which gets them not just physical media releases, but gets them on streaming platforms and gets them in circulation again. So it's a good cycle to be in, and it's a guaranteed revenue stream because you are always consistently selling titles or making money off of licensing to boutique labels. So if a studio was to kill off their physical media division and go all digital, it would be shooting themselves in a foot in a way, because it would be removing that consistent revenue stream, and it would also make them less inclined to keep up with preservation efforts and to keep titles coming back into circulation. They'll just start throwing on whatever they have or whatever exists when they think of it, if they think of it, onto a streaming platform or digital platform, because they think everyone does not care about what media they consume and will go for convenience over anything else, which that only goes so far. And all you have to do is look at a handful of different titles, different films, to see that most of them have a problem somewhere. Most of them have a transfer issue or an audio problem, or it varies, but it's not just physical media, it's also streaming platforms. It's all films and how they've been handled. So very few films get a full archival presentation where everything is letter perfect and everything is done as good as humanly possible based on what survives. And in the digital realm, you simply never know what will turn up. There could be a title with a brilliant restoration, but It's just not streaming. What streaming is a 20-year-old master with edge enhancement and digital noise reduction and a bad audio remix of a bad audio remix that has a sync error on the streaming version. Plus, you've got terrible compression, and it's just a mess. And that's all people have access to because the physical media version's out of print. That's just a hypothetical scenario, but you can start to get the idea. This can happen with any form of physical media. So with this happening in the world of gaming, it doesn't bode well for everything else, and it pushes us multiple steps closer to an all digital future, which doesn't have to be a bad thing. I think Sony needs to allow for paying customers to be able to, at the very least, where possible, have hard copy downloads. It would be like audiophiles who go to high-res music platforms and purchase high-resolution copies of albums and new high-res remasters of albums, or even surround versions of albums, and they pay a premium price, but they do download the actual physical files, whether it be FLAC, WAV, or another format. And these releases typically are not available in a physical form, as the music industry still insists on using the CD. The SACD is barely still around, but they're basically just specialty releases. And using the Blu-ray format for surround music releases, unfortunately, has never fully taken off. So actual physical releases of high-res music albums or surround music albums is a very rare thing. It's a very tiny percentage of the overall market. So audiophiles who want these releases, if you even know they exist, you're stuck having to go to digital storefronts and paying substantial amounts of money for what's supposed to be a premium version of the album that you're having to buy digitally, but you do actually get to download the album you purchased and the individual song tracks in whatever format you choose. And you're typically given an option if you want FLAC or WAV, or depending on the storefront, you're given some choice or choice of the resolution. If we are going to an all digital storefront for all media at some point, that's the type of mentality we need to see. We need to see a digital storefront that gives you the option to actually get a digital hard copy of what you have purchased digitally, not to keep something locked behind paywalls within a certain company's streaming ecosystem where things could change at a moment's notice, or things could simply be removed, or you could lose access to what you paid for. That's why it's so important, I think, to allow people to download digital hard copies so they can then archive them themselves. Of course, that means you then have to keep up with your own hard drives and build your own server of your own media, but a lot of people already do that in terms of backing up their physical discs or creating a home movie server for their own personal use, which is perfectly legal and also helps when you run into things like disk rot, which can happen. But Sony is not really considering any of this. They just put out their statement, and then it's been pretty much radio silence ever since, and this is caused further upset and turmoil, and caused not just gamers but all collectors and fans of physical media to start worrying about every form of physical media, because if a major corporation like Sony is going to do this in the field of video gaming, then who knows what's going to happen for everything else, as other companies could easily decide to follow Sony's lead. So it doesn't set a good precedent, and we already have a lot of other issues in all forms of media in terms of how things are being locked away digitally, and versions are changed, or things are simply removed from circulation, and you're just pretty much stuck with what you're able to have access to for that particular time. As a lifelong physical media collector and book collector, and also someone who does a great deal of transfer comparison and research, and also having to source elements from past physical media releases and cobble things together, it feels really strange, of course, that things are continually moving to an all-digital storefront, and the consumption of media is entirely different from where it was just even a few years ago. But also knowing how fragile preservation of any form of media is, and how so many things are being lost to time, or mistakes are made, and how things are copied over or changed or supposedly restored, or even good restoration preservation efforts aren't always the versions in circulation. There's so many things that can go wrong and frequently do already. So not having access to physical hard copies of things anymore does not bode well for anyone. And so there has been a petition that's been started. It's gotten a lot of signatures to try and coerce Sony into reversing their decision. There's been a lot of people who have canceled their PlayStation Plus memberships in protest. There are many who are saying they're not going to purchase a PlayStation 6. And I have to say, that's really the best option if any of this rubs you the wrong way or you don't feel good about this decision, is that you really do have to vote with your wallet. So I have not really gotten much out of my PlayStation Plus experience with PS5. I don't really play that many games anymore, and most of them don't really appeal to me all that much. So I have canceled my PlayStation Plus membership. I merely got it on sale because I got a new console, which again I only got for a couple games and had to save up for because I really wanted to play First Light most of all. I have no intention of getting a PS6, especially if it does not include a disc drive, as it does seem to be entirely digital. And as someone who has owned all 5 of the past PlayStation consoles in some form or another over the years, that feels really weird to say or think, as I have been there since the PlayStation 1 days as a PlayStation fan. I did not have the Nintendo or Microsoft consoles. I was always Team PlayStation of the 3. I've, of course, played those and owned some of those in the years since, but to think that I'm most likely not ever going to be purchasing another PlayStation console feels extremely weird. But I think that's where a lot of us are at in terms of gamers and longtime PlayStation fans. Anyway, I just wanted to get some of my thoughts out there because this isn't just a gaming issue. It's part of the overall larger issue of ownership in terms of digital media and how media is being consumed, and how the various corporations are acting as gatekeepers to really cut off our access to our shared culture, which is media. But this does have the potential to strongly affect physical media releasing habits of studios in regards to other forms of entertainment. So we will have to wait and see if any of the major studios or distributors decide to change their stance or alter their physical media habits or their licensing, and of course what that will mean for the boutique labels. I don't foresee anything changing in a major way in that regard anytime soon, but anytime a big industry domino falls like this, it opens a giant can of worms, and you just don't know what's going to happen after that or what it might influence. So that's why I wanted to make a video. I encourage people to look into this issue, think about all aspects of it, and so it's become a matter of we just have to wait and see what's going to happen. But if you do feel strongly about this issue, which I think every physical media collector should take a stance on, I encourage you to go look at the petitions, or if you're also a current PlayStation Plus subscriber, I would encourage you to perhaps consider canceling your membership if you feel strongly enough. But if enough people do that, that is the clearest sign that could be sent to Sony that this is the wrong approach to take. So those are my thoughts and babbles about the Sony announcement to remove physical media from their PlayStation ecosystem by 2028. It's a gigantic issue for a number of reasons that has a lot of far-reaching implications beyond the world of just gaming, so every physical media collector or consumer should be concerned. I'm happy to continue the discussion in the comments below if you have any thoughts on this issue, but otherwise we just we're left to see what's going to happen after the backlash that has erupted since Sony's sort of casual announcement that they have decided to completely change the gaming market overnight. So with that being said, I just want to say, as always, keep your disc spinning, and thank you ever so much for watching.